Okay, this actually just is a continuation of malaria. And the AP complexins from Plasmodium, um, from the genus Plasmodium, are what it causes the disease that we know as malaria. Here are some of the symptoms. You've been over them before on your sheet: severe chills, headache, fever, fatigue. It is a worldwide problem, and the figure might be a little bit higher now since I made this PowerPoint, but around 3 million people die every year from malaria. Do know that these symptoms are on a, a cycle, and it's going from the liver to the red blood cell, and each time it's reproducing as it travels, and the symptoms get worse and worse. One of the later signs is going to be um, not dementia, but they're paranoid. They don't they don't recognize you. They think that you're trying to harm them, and they get very combative, a lot like rabies, and they um, they will fight. A lot of times they have to be strapped down to be treated. In severe cases, of course, it can cause death. Here is your mosquito. Fortunately, we don't have the Anopheles mosquito. When you're writing Anopheles, as I've told you before, it needs to be underlined because that is a genus name. And um, the life cycle, of course, the mosquito is going to have to bite an infected individual. Now, when it bites, it takes up the plasmodium in a completely different form. And it shows you this. This is from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And so it shows you the stages. And I'm not going to put this on your test as far as any diagram. But the sporozoites, now this is going to be the one with the hard covering, is going to enter the bloodstream and infect your liver first. The new cells, when it reproduces, the new cells are called merozoites, and they're going to leave the liver and head for the red blood cell. At regular intervals, they burst from the red blood cell, and when they do, we really haven't talked about this before, but when they do, they release a toxin. All right, another apicomplexan, Toxoplasma gondii. This is the one that is very serious in women that are pregnant, and it causes a disease known as toxoplasmosis. Actually, in adults, adults can have it and have very few symptoms, but if a woman is pregnant, then it's very serious to the developing fetus, and we have talked about this one before. So this also is an apicomplexan. Now remember, they're traveling in the blood. They have to be injected or they have to be inhaled. They have to get in because they're all parasites. So they don't have cilia, they don't have flagella, and they're traveling as a parasite into the host. All right, your phylum is Apicomplexa, and they call them the apicomplexans. Their body plan is they're single celled, and the sporozoites they say are motile only because they're traveling in the blood, but actually they they're immobile as adults, so they're not flagellates or ciliates. They're all parasites, and the most common representative genera is Plasmodium. All right, let's move into our plant-like. So we have animal-like, plant-like, and fungus-like. And plants have true roots, stems, and leaves. To be in the kingdom Plantae, you have to have those three criteria. And they don't have specialized tissues. So if you don't have specialized tissues and they don't have specialized reproductive structures, they're not going to be able to fit into the plant kingdom. Now, some of these are going to be unicellular. A lot of the algae is unicellular, but we're also going to talk about some that are multicellular, and those are going to be our seaweeds. So many of them are known as algae. Algae are autotrophic, meaning they're capable of making their own food. They have chloroplast, and they are producing their carbohydrates, which is glucose, through photosynthesis. So they do contain chlorophyll. You can see that they're green. The algae are single-celled, and they're the simplest form. Now, they lack tissue differentiation. That means they don't have any true tissues, so that we know that a collection of cells form a tissue, and tissues form um, organs, and organs form organ system, but they don't have that differentiation, so there's not going to be a true root, stem, or leaf. What they do, excuse me, is they form gametes in a chamber called a gametangia. And the gametes are different than what you would see in plants. So this is another reason why they are not in the plant kingdom. And to the left there, you can see a closer up picture of what algae looks like. Now, they're very diverse, but they do share some common characteristics. First of all, their photosynthetic pigment is chlorophyll A. Most of your algae are aquatic, and at some point, not at all times, but at some point, they do have flagella in their life cycle. Now, they're going to contain pyrenoids, and these are structures associated with the chloroplast that synthesize and store their carbohydrates as starch. Pyrenoids are structures that are very closely associated with the chloroplast in algae. And the pyrenoids, pyro means hot or red. Sometimes they use it as red, pyrethrins. And their job is to help with the storage of their carbohydrate. And we know that they store their carbs in the form of starch. And if you go back, remember, starch are glucose molecules hooked together, only glucose molecules. So that's the way algae stores their carbs. Now, they have some basic body forms. There's 4 of them. First of all, they can be unicellular. The unicellular algae are free living, which means they're not parasitic, and they make up phytoplankton. Plankton overall is a word for a group of organisms. If it is algae and carrying out photosynthesis, it's in the group called phytoplankton. If it's little critters and animals and other protists, then it's called zooplankton. So plankton overall is just a huge word, and within there you can have your phytoplankton and your zooplankton. Okay, so they can be unicellular. They can also be colonial. Colonial just means volvox. That should be underlined, actually. That's a scientific name for a type of green algae in which it's single-celled, but it sticks together, so it lives in colonies. Bacteria do that. Our filamentous algae is going to be sort of long filaments. Spirogyra, that should be underlined as well, is a type that lives in filamentous form. And then we have our multicellular, our algae seaweeds, and these are the largest. So we're going from a very small unicellular to a very, very large, especially when we start talking about kelp that can be hundreds of meters long.